26, 2016. Before we get into our regular business meeting, we have our public forum on all board matters, including anything on our agenda, resolutions and ordinances. I don't believe we have no ordinances today, but we do have a resolution. So for anybody watching for the first time on their computer screen, or anybody in the audience hasn't been here before, we provide up to 45 minutes starting at 9 o'clock for folks to come provide testimony to the board on those items. We also will, if it's not something that's under the board's purview, we'll ask staff to maybe get together with you after you testify to figure out how we can help you. And it may be that we can answer some questions for you after the public forum has been completed and people have provided their testimony. We provide 45 minutes. So what we'd like to do is limit the testimony to 3 minutes per member. We have 11 people signed up, so with some time and breaks, I suspect we're going to come close to taking all 45 minutes here this morning. I'm going to call you up in groups of 2, and again, ask you to introduce yourself, and we'll begin. So let me get the list out here. The first we have is Joe Kanzler.
Kunzler, sir.
Kunzler, thank you very much. Come on up. And Mary Longoria. Good morning.
Good morning. It's just checking. Don't want to waste your time, and I don't want to waste anybody else's time this morning. I came here. I left home at about 3:30 this morning to be here to address this crisis that is in our transit community. I wanted to stop by here today before I went to the Cascade Policy luncheon on TriMet. And I wanted to address you in a respectful manner about my number one concern about TriMet's future. And as you may notice, I'm wearing a Sound Transit hat. I'm a huge fan of Sound Transit. I think they're absolutely awesome. And I will not spike the football in your face because I hate bullies. And I tell you what else I hate. And speaking of bullying, and I want to be very straight up about this. You have a very serious driver assault problem, and you also have a problem with your brand on social media, because when you go to Twitter, when you go to Facebook, you see, and certainly YouTube, you see your TriMet brand being associated with the 44 documented driver assaults this year with 2 months to go. You had 41 last year, and here's a short video found on the internet. That's what's out there about your brand. It's happened 44 times this year. I don't know what you have to do, but I'm speaking as a friend of transit, obviously, not a firebrand critic. I'm speaking as a friend of transit. I ask you, give Mr. Sapota all the resources he needs to crack down on these driver assaults. If that means you need to go down to Salem and kick some butt and say, if you assault an operator, you're going to jail for 10, 20 years, that's what you have to do. I'm asking you to go on offense on these driver assaults. 44 assaults this year. I don't know about you, but if this were going on at Sound Transit, I know that my friend, Mr. Rogoff, I know that Karen Kitsis, I know Jeff Patrick would pick up weapons and protect those drivers, because this is not acceptable. And I am sadly of the view, very sadly, as I said on Lane Jensen's podcast last August, that Taggart should reject 34-255 until such time as this driver assault problem is dealt with and your maintenance issues are dealt with. And I apologize if I have to step out at about 9:20 a.m., but I do have other appointments and I do have to worry about your safety and unreliability. And I want to say again before the light goes red that I respect your time. I appreciate you giving me the time to come to you in a hopefully respectful manner. And with that, I will take my seat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe.
You are quite welcome. Let's go save our drivers' lives.
Mary?
I must say in the beginning, I do concur with the assaults that are going on is definitely needs to be addressed. Good morning, President Warner and the TriMet Board. My name is Mary Longoria, and as you know, I am the Financial Secretary at ATU 757. Over my years at TriMet and ATU, I have gotten to know many of our maintenance workers, and today we are here to highlight the group of talented, dedicated, and often overlooked men and women. Bus and rail operators are our frontline workers that greet the public every day, the group of our members that is most often in the spotlight. However, what we don't often hear about are the 700 or so maintenance workers that keep our transit system operating each day. The men and women behind the garage doors, on the platforms, who work graveyard and dedicate their lives to the community they serve. Today I'm here to introduce you to the workers and the many jobs that keep our communities on the move. I would first like to talk to you about our bus mechanics, since that might be who first comes to mind for all of us. Our bus maintenance mechanics go through a 2-year apprenticeship program in order to become journey workers. Literally every kind of maintenance that a bus may need, from an engine overhaul to an oil change, these men and women are prepared to work throughout the night to keep the buses moving and ready for the next day. We all know how many buses go through this city every day and how important it is that those buses get out on time and in good working condition. Our light rail maintenance workers are responsible for maintaining light rail vehicles. They also go through an extensive apprenticeship program. We now have 6 different types of light rail vehicles, each with its unique differences. These journey workers have to be able to work around high voltage electricity, so they are very well trained in federal safety guidelines. Other rail maintenance classifications include workers such as overhead technicians that maintain the overhead catenary system, substation technicians that maintain high voltage electrical transformers, track maintainers that keep the light rail track in good working order, signal technicians that keep the signals and crossing arms in good working order. These journey workers are also test electrical wiring and equipment such as motors, generators, and air conditioning units. Maintenance Away is responsible for over 64 miles of rail throughout our system. Facilities maintenance workers have a vast amount of responsibilities and skills. These workers also go through a lengthy apprenticeship program. They are responsible for maintaining all of the buildings within the TriMet system, including garages, transit centers, platforms, and bathrooms. They do everything from painting, restroom plumbing, installing tactile strips on the platforms, lighting ballast repairs, gating system repairs, and they also maintain the hoists used throughout all of the transit garages, which enable our mechanics to work safely on buses and light rail vehicles. This is just a small snapshot of all they do. Fair equipment maintenance is tasked with keeping on all the ticket vending machines, transit trackers, cameras, communication equipment, radio equipment on the rail line, emergency phones, intrusion alarm systems inside the tunnel and on rail bridges in good working condition. The radio technicians help keep our operators and passengers safe through maintaining our lines of communication. They maintain the bus radio communications, the hardware that controls traffic lights when necessary, and the silent alarms that go directly from the bus to dispatch when an operator is in need of emergency assistance. They also maintain the hardware that tracks the number of passengers that board and deboard the bus each day. This doesn't include many of our hardworking union members at TriMet. We have landscapers, service workers and helpers, parts people, and so many more workers that work behind the scenes to keep our city moving. Today, we just want to give you a look at one of our groups and some of their ongoing issues. Thank you.
We'll have some comments about how valuable our maintenance folks are, I'm sure, after we get through here, because I see we've got quite a few folks from ATU who want to talk with us. Rich Kishner, is that right? And Krista Delisle? Good morning.
Morning. Hello, my name's Rich Kistner. I've worked at TriMet for just over 20 years in the facilities maintenance department. I've always loved my job and look forward to coming to work every day because I felt like I made a difference. Back in the days when we had the productivity improvement process, the facilities department saved TriMet hundreds of thousands of dollars on lighting and other projects. It was a great feeling to have your opinion be heard and valued. Over the years, I think facilities has proved that there's nothing we can't do. including fixing the steel bridge twice after the Cantonary had been smashed on the deck. It's really upsetting to me when our manager introduces all of the plant mechanics in a recent meeting as semi-professionals, and only her and 3 others in the class had a degree. Maybe we don't have a degree, but our real-life experience more than makes up for not having a degree. In July, we had 3 plant mechanics retire from Ruby Junction. 2 had 20 years and 1 had 35 years at TriMet. Our manager did not even come by to say goodbye or anything. I feel this is a blatant disrespect for them and our whole crew. On July 24th, the joist lift that lifts the trains and is a major tool to keep the trains running broke. Even though I had never worked on this lift, my 42 plus years of experience kicked in. We found the broken bolt in the gearbox, fixed it, and checked every other part of the hoist to ensure it was safe before turning it back over to maintenance. One of the apprentices was so impressed with the teamwork and knowledge put forth on the repair that he wrote a small article that should have been put into the express line. Instead, 2 of our managers got involved and squashed the article, as well as ridiculed us for the work we did and questioned our ability to work on this equipment, even though I have done this same type of work for 42 years. This is a blatant act of disrespect to all of us. When I took courses at TriMet U for being a supervisor, they all said, you need to know your crew's strengths and weaknesses. Our manager does not know or care what any of us know and acts like she's the only one that knows anything. Thanks to this type of management, morale is at an all-time low at TriMet. I really think management needs to realize that morale and productivity go hand in hand, and every time they squash morale, they cost the district a lot of money. TriMet was a great place to work, and it could be again if our management would just show us a little respect.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Krista Delisle, and I'm the Labor Relations Coordinator for ATU 757. A big part of my job is taking grievances on behalf of the union to arbitration. Since I have been doing this, a large part of my efforts have been focused on contracting out, or on TriMet's insistence on spending valuable resources to pay outside companies to do work that its own employees can and want to do. And that is what I'd like to talk to you about today. Unionized construction projects are more productive, more efficient, and produce greater quality goods than non-unionized construction. Why? Because unionized in-house workers have a vested interest in the quality of work and the outcome of the job. When companies like TriMet contract out work to people who don't have a dog in the race, or perhaps a bus in the fleet, they end up spending more money for an inferior product. In fact, in our case, workers often have to go back and fix the work done by contractors, knowing the whole time that they could have done the work in the first place. TriMet maintenance workers go through a strenuous years-long program to develop the skills necessary to be a journeyman. Many of them have decades worth of experience, some of them at TriMet for all of it. They work hard and take pride in their finished product. They take the safety of the public and their coworkers to heart in all the work they do. And that is why it is so hard for them to see their work contracted out to other people who don't have a personal investment in this company or know the other people who work for it. People who don't have a reason to care about the outcome of their work past the point they leave the work site. When I speak to our maintenance workers about the issue of contracting out, they are never complaining that someone else made money instead of them, or even that they're often paid more than them. Instead, they complain that the work should have been theirs, that it belongs to them as part of their responsibilities, because they were capable of doing the work and because they were trained to do it. When they describe this to me, they use words like demeaning and devalued, and I can't argue with them. I have gotten to know many of our maintenance workers in my time at ATU, and I care about them. I respect them, and I admire their work ethic. The men and women I have been lucky enough to get to know are hard workers and proud workers, and they don't want anything but to be allowed to do the work that they are trained to do. They and the union just want TriMet to do what is right, not contract whatever it can, but whatever it needs to. We would never propose that TriMet is not allowed to contract out any work. In fact, the parties have bargained for a committee comprised of both management and union members to discuss when work should be contracted out. I firmly believe that if you ask any TriMet manager who is or has been on that committee, that you will hear that our members on that committee are nothing if not reasonable. The problem is that TriMet no longer brings the work to the committee before making that determination. TriMet would rather contract out work that they don't need to, knowing that later they will have to spend thousands upon thousands of dollars to go to arbitration again and again to argue that no, they didn't need to contract out the work, and yes, their workers were capable of doing it, but they contracted out the work because they could. And you will undoubtedly hear after this that an arbitrator said it's okay to contract out this work. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'm not here to argue it either. In fact, for the purposes of this testimony, I couldn't care less. I am not here to talk about what is legally acceptable or what TriMet can do, but what TriMet should do, about what is right. TriMet should allow its own workers to do work that they are capable of doing, that they are trained to do, and that they have done before. TriMet should pay its own workers to do that work rather than spending taxpayers' dollars to pay contractors more for a lower quality product. TriMet should prioritize the safety of its operators and riders above all else, therefore prioritizing the quality of the work completed along its existing system that its own workers are familiar with, far more familiar with than outside workers. TriMet should want people who care about the system and its riders and operators to care for the system. TriMet should let these people do their jobs. Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
You mentioned construction. So what construction do you?
Construction was just, that's where I was pulling my statistics from specifically, but in general, unionized work does tend to create a better quality product and be more efficient.
But we're not talking about building buildings, or what are you?
No, not talking about
We're
building.
talking about
buildings.
any service, we're talking.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very
Thank you.
much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Kristen.
All right, next people we have are Mike Salzman and Jennifer Webb. I assume you must be Mike Salzman.
I'm Mike, yes.
All right. Johnny on the spot, I like that, all right. Or Mike on the spot.
That works.
Go ahead, Mike, please.
President Warner and members of the board, my name is Mike Salzman, of course, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the facilities maintenance family. I have over 35 years' experience as a maintenance technician, and I take a lot of pride in my work. Most of the entire family at TriMet does. My apprenticeship took 15 years, 5 years as a maintenance mechanic and 10 years as a maintenance technician. I received most of my training at Tektronix Incorporated in Beaverton and from Portland Community College. In 1995, Tektronix outsourced its entire maintenance group to a company called Morrison Knudsen. Within 5 years after the outsourcing, systems fell into disrepair and they lost millions in productive costs. Lack of systems maintenance was to blame. The company never recovered and since has laid off thousands of employees and have been acquired by an outside company called Danaher Corporation. Our facilities families alone, with the rest of the TriMet maintenance, shares Krista's concerns about contracting out our work. We don't want to see TriMet suffer the same fate as Tektronix continue to waste public resources. 20 years ago, I was hired by TriMet as the last of a group of professionals from the outside. There was no apprenticeship program for facilities at the time. We were asked to do our best and work together, which we did. For many years, our department was a cohesive and motivated family unit. We still have this can-do attitude. However, the support for our efforts has declined significantly. As the backbone of the company, we are tasked with working behind the scenes to keep all critical systems operating and properly maintained. We have proven our abilities in many ways. A few years back, we repaired damage to a key component of the steel bridge. The overhead catenary power system was heavily damaged by the bridge operator. Our management asked for volunteers from our group to see if there was anything that could be done. 5 men from facilities, including myself, and a team from OCS worked tirelessly through the night to repair the damage and limit service interruptions to our customers. As TriMet has grown, so has our workload, but the ability to track it has stalled. Upper management has been complacent in their efforts to listen to our requests. They are ignoring and disempowering us. Without the proper MMIS tracking system, our tasks have doubled in size and scope. There is no way to plan or prioritize the future beyond next month. There is no credible way to keep track of our systems maintenance purchasing. As a result, we are reactive instead of proactive. Our preventive maintenance practices have given way to the priority repairs. Preventive maintenance is performed as time allows. This is not a cost-effective practice. Within our group, we have over 100 years of experience, yet we are not trusted to determine the best way to conduct our work. In fact, we are often questioned as to whether we are qualified to complete the work that we have done for decades. You hired us as professionals. Please treat us that way. To top it all, that we have problems getting proper funding because we are the last group thought of. In fact, we were recently reminded of this by a top manager at a retirement party. She stated, "We all know facilities is the bottom of the list. This needs to change. We have a costly amount of repairs looming in our near future. Brickwork decay, roof systems failures, aging equipment failures, to name a few. We take pride in our work. We have skills to do it well. We add a lot of value to TriMet. Show us that you think we still have value." Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Ms. Webb?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Webb. I am a journeyman mechanic at Merle Maintenance. And I came here to discuss a few of the issues of us being threatened, disciplined, and bullied when it comes to safety issues, concerns, even management breaking some of the policies that we have in place. I, for one, have been disciplined in these areas when I'm just trying to do my job. I have been forced and bullied to break the law in order to get my job done and get buses out for service. We have multiple employees at least my garage that are disabled. They have walking issues. We have asked to have more parking down closer to the garage where we have the disabled parking. We have asked for 2 more spots. Those spots were denied for our 5 disabled people, and they were turned into visitor parking, which we already have adequate visitor parking, especially the football field away that our disabled people have to walk. And I'm just here to get some of our concerns heard. I would like to see something get done, not just for our disabled employees, but for everybody. I mean, we shouldn't be forced to be breaking the law, having fines put upon us as employees and the company. And I'm sorry. That's about it. I'm very passionate about the safety issues that go on. I don't want to see anybody get disciplined. I am willing to stand up and get disciplined myself for bringing these upon not only you, but management. And, excuse me. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
The incident she just mentioned, as a facilities maintenance man, we were asked at the time to change the signs out. And they were totally expecting the handicap. And when they saw the new signs go up, it demoralized the entire shop. So I'm also the safety committee chairman on the light rail side at El Monica. And I think that was a slap in the face.
Okay. Thank you both. Appreciate your comments. All right, the next 2 we have are Kevin Kinochita and John Hunt.
Ouch.
I know John, so you must be Kevin.
Yes.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. Ready?
You bet.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Kevin Kinoshita. I'm a bus maintenance mechanic for TriMet and executive board officer of ATU 757. I come before the board this morning to ask that the maintenance department on the bus side immediately receive basic first aid and CPR training, and that here on out is required and provided training for all TriMet maintenance workers. As the winter season is around the corner, we prepare for snow and ice season by making sure the change for the buses from last year are in good working order, practice driving buses up on ramps in shops, assuring the sand trucks are ready to go, and so on. But we can only prepare for so much, and this does not prepare us for when something goes wrong. Most of you here know TriMet does not close even in bad winter conditions. That means someone has to work the off shifts while most Portlanders are at home and in bed during these conditions. While digging buses out and laying in snow might be fun for the first time, it does take long to realize that this is a dangerous task and that should not be taken lightly. It can get very interesting unblocking an on-ramp that's a sheet of ice when the bus has slid across all lanes, blocking traffic, or retrieving a bus that's close to hitting two cars on a hill on a narrow street while the neighborhood is watching. These are high-pressure situations involving large, heavy vehicles, and we have to be prepared for anything to happen. While there are other agencies out in the elements with us, the one thing that we don't have to do is basic first aid and CPR training. A lot of times you are working with other maintenance employees during these conditions, and if there's an injury, the emergency vehicles can't always get to you as quickly. Furthermore, there are numerous times during these conditions when we get to the bus, passengers are still on there, people are walking home or driving, just trying to get home in the icy conditions. Now we become first responders. So some simple training would go a long way in making us feel more confident and comfortable when we are in these situations. Let me be clear, we're not asking for more money here, but for more support to do our job the best we can, for training to provide a better service to TriMet and the public. This is just another example of TriMet missing out on an opportunity to use its own employees who want to work and who are willing to learn. Preparing us in this way is better for us, for TriMet, and for the public. Not preparing us in this way leads us to believe that you do not have faith in us or our quality as employees. And this makes us feel that safety is not a top priority at this time. This is not the only training we need, or the only preparation TriMet needs to take for snow and ice and other emergencies. I believe this board has heard from Vice President Jonathan Hunt's concerns that though it is in the contract to do so, TriMet has yet to meet the union to develop operating protocols for emergency situations. Union members work on and within TriMet systems every day. We know the system better than anyone. To not include us in the development of emergent protocols is yet another wasted opportunity. And I'll conclude. We are important, is sometimes invisible part of what keeps this city moving. We only ask that we be treated that way. Again, I'm asking that before the snow and ice event happens, that bus maintenance gets first aid and CPR training, because the person that we might help might be any one of us in this room here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks, Kevin. John, welcome.
Good morning, President Warner, members of the board. As you know, my name is Jonathan Hunt, Vice President at ATU 757. Some of you may not know that before becoming a full-time officer of this union, I worked as a journeyman diesel mechanic, and I take these maintenance issues to heart. During the time in the maintenance department, I experienced leadership that honored seniority and valued promoting within. This created hope for the future and a fair pathway for advancement. I hope you will take these men and women, what they had to say today, seriously by engaging with the union in a meaningful dialogue to resolve these important issues. We have valuable employees who are already have shown their loyalty to you. The men and women have taken entry-level jobs because they were attracted to the opportunity for advancement into the journeyman mechanic programs, and now TriMet is twisting the intent of our agreement. Let me further explain. In the contract negotiations, the parties agreed to the following: that TriMet could hire 50% of the apprentices and up to 5 journey mechanics from outside. The intent was to have all outside individuals go through the joint apprenticeship committee made up of equal members of management and the union before becoming journeyman mechanics. This was to ensure that the pre-qualifications would meet TriMet and state standards, as well as for the union to provide an avenue for maintaining seniority. This is not happening. How TriMet is running the program today has resulted in animosity within our work groups, confusion, distrust aimed at the union. In the past, they've at least hardshipped, a term that allows our members to keep their seniority while allowing the employer to meet their business needs. This would be an easy and available solution, and we request TriMet to consider. The notes from negotiation show that we shared intent. The union never intended for these off-the-street journeymen to circumvent seniority. TriMet now ignores this. People have been lied to about what's really going on in this program. And to make matters worse, our workers are required to read postings in their own workplace, informing them that only non-union individuals can apply for these jobs. We believe that this has affected the staffing level and attrition, but TriMet continues to hide the ball, keeping the union from truly knowing what's going on with our members. We are not trying to handcuff TriMet on this issue. In fact, we've reached out on several occasions. We are interested in finding solutions to this problem. We thank you for listening to the maintenance issues today and taking the time to get to know this group of hardworking, dedicated employees. I believe it has been said, but I will say it again, that these employees might work behind the scenes, but our great transit system simply would not move if it weren't for their hard work. Thank you for your time. I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions? No, your points are well taken. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
And then the last person we have signed up is Chris Walker. Oh, excuse me. Chris Walker and Joan Schrader. Last two. Joan, I think you'd signed up first.
Okay. My name is Joan Schrader, and I live in Happy Valley, Oregon. And I feel like I have just walked into a family discussion.
In the kitchen.
In the kitchen. And for all the maintenance workers and drivers and people who do make TriMet work, thank you very, very much. All of us appreciate you. And the board, thank you for serving on the board. Thank you, Craig. I looked you up. You're from the Happy Valley or somewhere area in Clackamas. I appreciate you, too. And I'm here because I have tried everything I know to do to allow the individuals with special needs that I care for in Happy Valley to be able to ride the lift. They are prevented from riding the lift because we are 3/4 of a mile away from the boundary. I believe the boundary is there because people on the top of Mount Scott don't ride the TriMet bus. And so why send buses up there? So they moved the boundary, which to me is a reasonable thing, but it affected the lift. And so I called TriMet, and I have a, what do you call it, a complaint or a request in. I kept calling to find out about my complaint and request, and after a while I thought, this isn't going anywhere. There's no time frame on replying to my request. So I thought, I'll call the Department of Transportation, because the lift is transportation. So this week I called the Department of Transportation and got a hold of a gal, and although I had a meeting in Salem this morning, I got an email at the end of the day yesterday saying there was a board meeting today for TriMet. And so here I am, and my request is that you would perhaps look into my situation for my fellows and expedite the request that they could ride the lift. We do pay the tax. My staff all pay the tax, and they love the lift. Secondly, I request a policy to be put in place for a time frame so that when we have a request like this, we can just get her done. And then lastly, the lift drivers are afraid to drive up my driveway to pick up my guys, but my guys can't walk down the driveway because they're not able to. And there's plenty of room up there. We have a nature park, and there's lots of parking, but the beginning of it looks kind of narrow, so they're afraid to drive up, and they say it's street only. So even if you advocate for me to get the guys on the lift, they still can't ride it if the lift doesn't park by the house. So there you have it.
Thank you. Maybe we can have staff. This is not an uncommon issue.
Okay.
We have a number of places around the Portland metro area in our districts where people, because of our boundary limitations, are unable to get that service. But there are some other options that we can maybe steer her towards.
I suspect some members of the staff do have your contact information, but if not, Clay Thompson, who was at the information desk, if you could provide that, we'll make sure that we get back to you in a timely way. And I appreciate your testimony. And I would share what the board president noted, which is we are required to provide equivalent service. The ADA have certain standards. We do meet those standards, and there are a number of places that sort of fall without that. Sometimes there's grandfathering that goes on if there are service changes, but in general, we need to look into this and report back to you.
We did used to have Lyft come, and they quit for some reason.
Okay. We'll get you some more detailed answers on how we can, because I understand your frustration and your needs. So thank you for taking the time to come here today. It's really appreciated.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Joan.
Chris?
I would like to say a word of thanks to everybody at TriMet for the new installation of grab bars. I'm not sure what series it is, but it's the buses that have just one seat in the back and there's no railing, and if the driver has to stop hard, even though you're in a seatbelt, or if there's construction and bumpy roads, you're bouncing all over the place. And it has been one of our requests to get a bar put up so that they have something to grab onto, so that if there's a hard stop or something, in traffic or whatever, they have something to grab onto instead of just flinging forward. I usually manage very well, but I know there is a bunch of people who probably don't, older people or whatever, who have a hard time managing. So this is a thanks to TriMet and the maintenance and everybody for a job well done with that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. So that concludes those who've signed up for the public forum here this morning. Before our ATU folks leave, I thought we might have a couple comments about maintenance. I know I've got a couple. Anybody else, other comments or questions from the board? I guess I just want to say to you folks, first off, safety is a priority for the board. If you haven't understood that, you need to understand it very clearly that safety is a priority. And I agree with you that the maintenance side of any organization is often the invisible part of the organization. But if it isn't working right and you're not doing your jobs, we hear about it a lot. I've been in charge of maintenance at the road maintenance at the city, county, and state level, and I know that if those people in the background aren't doing their jobs, the system fails, doesn't work. And so I want you to know we really appreciate what you do. And if you haven't been told that a lot, you should be, because you're very important. I've also had the opportunity to work in a service station because my dad had one, and took care of many vehicles, and I understand what it's like to get out and deal with a fleet putting on chains in the middle of the night so they can go out and keep the phone lines operational, is what I had to do. So again, your work is greatly appreciated, and hopefully we can, I don't know whether staff has any response to any of the issues now, but I think we look forward to the contract negotiations, which I believe are starting up here shortly, and hopefully we can get some clarity on some of those issues. But some of the things that you mentioned, staff will definitely look into. Mr. General Manager, do you have any comments or?
I'll add when we get to that part.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, thank you all for coming. It's greatly appreciated. All right, with that, I'm going to close the public forum, and I'm going to call to order the regular business meeting of the TriMet Board of Directors for October 26, 2016. And we start with our board reports, and the first report is on the Transit Equity Advisory Committee, or as we sometimes call it, TEAC, and our representative is Dr. T. Allen Bethel. Dr. Bethel, do you have a report for us this morning?
Good morning, Mr. President and the rest of the board. Thank you. Yes, TEAC met in the last meeting, and they broke out into 4 project work groups: low-income fares, developing an equity lens, fare enforcement, and expanding contracting opportunities to try to build out a draft goals and strategies for each of those areas that I've mentioned, as well as discuss some updates. Jake War walked the committee through a draft of the 2017-2018 service plans proposal, and TEAC did provide some feedback and input for TriMet's planning department. TEAC members also got to meet with Mike Bishop, a prospective new TEAC member from Washington County, as well as to hear from Honor Panich from the Committee on Accessible Transportation, or the CAT, as part of our public comment section. Meeting went very well, and that's most of the highlights that we want to highlight at this time. If there's any questions, we will be glad to take them.
Any questions for Dr. Bethel? All right, thank you very much for the report.
Thank you.
The next report we have on the agenda is the Metro Policy Advisory Committee report, MPAC, which Director Prosser would normally give, but he has lost his voice, which is a very good excuse, by the way. And I don't believe we have anybody else who attended the meeting here today. So unless you have some comments, Mr. General Manager, I'll just defer this until next month. Maybe with your voices back, you can give us 2 months reports at the same time, okay? So that concludes our board reports. I'd like to go on to the General Manager's report. Mr. McFarland?
Yes, Mr. Board President, members of the board, good morning. I did want to just respond at the top up to some of the topics raised in public forum. One is on the driver assaults, and as you well know, this has been a very urgent matter for all of us. We have formed a continuous improvement team with operators, with the transit police, with our security staff to delve into this. You've also instituted within our recertification training, which is underway right now, a federally developed class on de-escalating issues for operators and dealing with that sort of, if you will, psychological side of dealing with the difficult public at various points in time. And we're also now beginning to install some protective shields as sort of a pilot on a couple of, on one at least at each garage, and we'll continue that pilot and monitor its effect. And again, working closely with our workforce to make sure that we've done everything we can. There's no higher priority for the transit police than dealing with these issues. And it's unfortunate that there has been an escalation of these issues over the last year in particular, but really it stretches back a couple of years. And I would also note that in talking to some of my colleagues around the country, this is not an unusual fact. We're not singled out in this regard. Seattle Metro is dealing with the same issues. And so one of my hopes is that we can begin to learn from others in the industry about the successful tactics that can reduce these numbers of issues that come along. And there are obviously others here who are very much involved in the front row of that, but I just note that it is not a single solution kind of issue. There will be many different aspects of finding a solution to reduce the numbers and reduce the risk for our operators. It is a very important topic for us. I just wanted to note that, yes, sir.
Thank you very much for that update, Neil. And I think what you just referenced by this being a critical priority for the agency, and I believe for the board wholeheartedly, I think this is something that, from my perspective at least, and the rest of the board can chime in if I'm off base, but I think this is one of those issues that I would like to see a continuous update process on. This is a really critical issue, and I think you're right. I think other agencies are seeing some of the same challenges, but I think we've got to really shine the spotlight on it and continue to work hard on doing everything we possibly can and putting the resources behind it to address it. And I think a more timely update for the board on the process and what we're doing to address it, I think is something that, from my perspective, is warranted to ensure our focus and everybody's focus is really on this key matter.
Excellent, happy to do that. And we can actually begin that at the briefing or later this morning. if you'd
Timely,
like.
thank you very much. Wow. So greatly appreciate that.
Yes.
Are you done?
I am.
We're working with the union for any kind of, with all kinds of input and information, or they may have that, maybe not accessible to everybody in this
So the union
agency, or
is
nationally and locally.
Well, I would just note that related to the continuous improvement team, yes, the union is, including, asking President Block and others related to their, not necessarily participation every day, but overall acknowledgement. And I know the union executive board officers are involved in the effort. On the national front, there are other safety experts that the ATU have occasionally brought in, and we welcome that resource when they do. If I might continue then, related to our maintenance workers, actually the first topic that I was going to brief you on illustrates the value and importance of our maintenance workers and how much we frankly do appreciate them. And I'm very sorry if there are signals sent occasionally that might underscore that. But I was going to report to you about sort of the response to the weather events that we've recently been experiencing, including the windstorms and a little bit of flooding, once again in downtown Portland. And as you know, we had sort of an unpleasant experience with that a year ago, Halloween. And I wanted to just note that we had a number of urgent situations that occurred because of tree branches or trees or broken crossing arm gates or and flooding of intersections, particularly in downtown, starting in Goose Hollow all the way through Pioneer Square. And I would say that we had just absolutely excellent response from our maintenance staff and our maintenance workers, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm sure you are and our writers are. Not only was it an excellent response in terms of timely getting after the problems, but it was really focused on, first of all, safety of our customers, second of all, safety of our employees, and third of all, safety of our system and our assets. And the reason all of that was so important is that this year, despite the inevitable service interruptions that come when a tree falls across a track or a street, we were able to respond and restore service in relatively quick turnaround timelines. And so, again, our recovery was strong out of the events that happened. So, again, I'm very proud of the TriMet staff for that response and the work that was done over those weekends, particularly both a Friday and Saturday. So this was not a one-day event. This was a multiple-day event that required a great deal of extra work and overtime on the part of our staff. And again, very grateful for the good work that was done on all of that. I'd also just would note that in addition to the maintenance efforts and the excellent work that was done in that regard, I want to call out the work of our communications team. Worked closely with social media and all the other communication channels to make sure our writers knew the issues that we were facing and were able to make the best plans that they could given the circumstances we were facing. So again, I think it was an excellent effort at communication as well as responding. So again, these things are unpleasant. They do impact our writers. We're very sensitive about that. But again, I think the priorities were all in the right place, which is safety of customers, safety of our staff, and then safety of our assets so that we are in a position to restore service in a timely way. So again, thank you to everybody who participated in all of those urgent situations. And I think it just illustrates the importance of our maintenance staff, and I think it was a great connection to the testimony that you heard earlier. Any questions on that? I did want to note just also.
Mr. General Manager,
Yeah.
this is the one comment I want to make out of the things that I heard from maintenance, and certainly appreciate all that maintenance and facilities do. But also just want to highlight that if we could really look into getting the extra parking spaces, as one who has a problem with the walking issues and distances, I do understand how that is, and being able to park as close as you can to walk is great. So I hope we could look into that, and create, even if it's some reserved spaces that they can have, so that they can be able to get into work without having to walk a long distance as possible.
I made a note of that, and we definitely will we'll respond to that and let you know the outcome of that as well. I would note that some of the other issues that were brought up are subject to a labor, either grievances or unfair labor practices, so they are in the process of adjudication, and and any personnel actions, of course, I wouldn't want to report to you in this setting. I just wanted to note also for ridership, this is the first year since 1 year since the Orange Line opened. So we do have a little bit of apples and oranges in our ridership comparison from last September to this September, because we had, of course, a free weekend of ridership associated with the Orange Line. We had a great sort of flurry of additional ridership, but people were beginning to explore that option. So we do not have very clean numbers in terms of true ridership comparisons. But that said, I would just note that we do see ridership down this month compared to last year. And some of that was the promotional rides associated with the Orange Line, about 4%. So we are continuing sort of our deep dive into this. I would tell you that as I look around at our peer agency, we're seeing the same, or frankly, much more dramatic trends in terms of ridership drop nationwide. So with the exception of some very big, very urban systems, which have some other problems in terms of growth. So I would say that this is a topic we're continuing to really dive into and delve into and begin to see what's affecting our ridership. In general, what we're seeing is that the peak hour ridership remains very strong. As a matter of fact, I had the opportunity to ride the Orange Line in a couple days this last week, and those trains, as they approach the Moody Station at OHSU, are absolutely packed in the morning, literally standing room only. Yet we don't see the ridership responding in terms of midday and weekends quite like we have seen in other situations. So we do think that this is really related a lot to the current gas prices, and we will continue to focus on that and look for ways that we can encourage additional ridership, particularly during those off-peak and weekend periods.
I've got a quick question, and I'll
Yes.
follow up on that. So as we look at the ridership, as I think about and think through some of the things that we've done, we haven't had a increase in fare, I believe, we're going on our 5th year.
Right.
5th year of no increase. And then we also went from the 2 hour to the 2.5 hour. And at this point, we've still seen a drop in ridership, except for the peak hours, because whenever I ride, it's usually the peak hours, and the blue line is almost always full to standing only during peak hours. So I don't quite see a diminish in the ridership during that time. But as we looked at the transfer, the major look at doing the 2.5 hour transfer was the off-peak, time frames. But we're not seeing an increase based on the increase of that time.
No, we're not. And again, we're doing a much more thorough review of our ridership, where and how, and so geographically, time of day. So we'll have a far better report to you as in the future. But I would also just note the other thing that we're noticing is that when you move out to the outer stretches of the system, the park and ride lots are at lower capacity than they have been historically. So, for example, that begins to tell us that people are choosing not to park and ride, but to take the car all the way to their destination. So there are economics, I think, that drive that right now. But it's a very interesting puzzle to begin to reassemble.
Now, some of the highlights, that we can glean just from the economic data, car sales are at all-time highs, over the last probably 12 to 24 months. Fuel prices are, if you look at it and they're adjusted for inflation, they're at some pretty low and stable rates and amounts. So as you begin to dissect some of that, initial national economic data, you could start to see and have some explanation ultimately as to potentially what's leading to this. But as an agency, we like to see, our ridership continue to grow as the population grows, and all of those things are combined. I'm just really interested. It'll be interesting to see that information and data because we want to make sure that we're making the right moves and the right decisions that positively impact our ridership, thus, getting people out of their cars and riding transit more. So it'll be interesting to see that information as it comes forth. So thank you.
Very good. No further questions on that. Just a couple of other quick updates. First on the Hot Pass program. Many of us were involved in tapping ourselves and through the first beta test, if you will, over the last month. And we used them on buses, on trains. We let our balances get low. We tried to reload our cards. I think the hardest thing was actually getting the package open to pull out the card. So there were a number of lessons learned from that will allow us to do another beta test here coming up in the new year. And actually, we will be providing you and all the other TriMet employees a new badge here soon that will be dual purpose, both related to the security functions of access to our facilities as well as the HOP access. So we'll be hosting some family days and other things for TriMet employees to make sure that we get new cards. Anecdotally, it also allows us to update the photos. And for example, some of our photos were taken back when certain people had full heads of hair. And so there are some other reasons that we need to, I think, update our photos and take care of that. But that will be upcoming. And I would just note that so far we've completed over 95% positively of the tests on the HOP system. So it is progressing quite well. We'll have a number of issues in terms of just sort of making sure the websites and the mobile app and other things are as friendly and as user friendly as possible. I think that was amongst the challenges that some of our first-time beta users had, was sort of navigating some of the electronic media, but all of that will be improved by the time we get to the new year, and then we'll continue to refine until we actually roll this out sometime around the middle of next year. So just a quick report on that. And also just another quick report on, one thing that I did want to note is that the training for operators related to the Hot Pass Pass is also part of a recertification program, which is underway right now. And we'll continue refresher training in the garages as each of the signups occur over this next year. I also just wanted to note that we are, I think, coming in for a landing on the Division BRT project. There were a number of very hard decisions that had to be made in order to squeeze the expectations into the budget that we think is available for this project at this time, given the constraints of the federal small starts program. There was a steering committee meeting on Monday. There's another one a couple weeks from last Monday. And the hope is that out of those conversations, we'll be able to hone a locally preferred alternative. We'll brief you a little bit more about that at your briefing, at your retreat, which is scheduled for early November. Again, the board will consider that locally preferred alternative as a separate action, probably in December at your December business meeting. But I think some good work has been going on that, some very hard decisions, some big expectations that frankly we as a consortium of agencies will have to step up to, but not all as part of the BRT project. And with that, unless there are questions from the board, I'd like to bring Dee up for the quarterly finance report. I know it's Board Member Prosser's favorite part of the agenda, so,
Might be Travis's also.
yeah.
Can I ask one other question?
Yes.
You brought, Travis mentioned the peak hour loading on the light rail vehicles. And I'm looking at the highway analysis, you know, we've got a huge peak problem there.
Right.
Also, and I think a lot of people are really talking about pricing, you know, utility type pricing to encourage folks to travel at off-peak times. Sometime when we talk about fares again, I'd love to understand what maybe some of the other properties are doing around the United States, maybe even in the world, to help spread that peak with just pricing policies, if there's actually been some.
Yeah, happy to do that, and actually, it's a timely conversation. I think what we want to do is get HOP up and running and working well with the current fare structure, but then, once we're at that point, there are some other alternatives that might become possible because of the electronic system.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Dee, our CFO, Dee Brookshire.
Good morning, President Warner, members of the board. This is our first quarter results in the new fiscal year. So our total revenue is below budget by 1.1 million. This is not unexpected, I think, considering some of the variables that we're dealing with, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Our total operating expenses, although, are also below budget by 8.1 million or 6.8%. So the net results from operations is that we're doing better than budget by 7.1 million. So starting with revenues, we'll talk about the payroll tax revenue just a bit. We are 0.4% above budget, or 300,000, sorry, and that actually includes our increment, our new tax increment. It grew 7.9% compared to the same quarter last year. Our passenger revenue is 5.7% lower than budget. It's a combination of both Max and Bus and Wes, 1.7 million, and this is in both passenger and ticket revenue this quarter. The last couple of quarters we've been seeing that the ticket revenues were down, but this time we're seeing that the passengers' revenue is also down. So the operating grant revenue information is that we did receive 700,000 so far this fiscal year, and we're expecting, we budgeted for 82 million in grant receipts for fiscal year 2017, and this is also, some of it is still related to PMLR. So. On the expense side, the system operating expenses were 4.5% under budget, or 5.2 million. Half of that was in the operations group and diesel fuel. The remainder of that was in a variety of areas, and in looking at it very closely, it looks like it's a timing situation. This is going to pick up during the next quarter. You'll see a tighter budget to actual situation. In our operating project expenses, 2.9 million under budget, 62.7%. It's a big number, but actually there's, relatively speaking, there's not as much money in the operating project pool as there are in some of the other expense categories. Any questions so far? Okay. Okay, well, let's look at the balance sheet net effect since June 30th of 2016. Again, it's only 3 months, but we've already seen that there was a decrease in our current assets of 118.3 million, and this was because we received the federal money in and we paid down our debt primarily on PMLR. For non-current assets, the total decreased by 24.6 million. This was a net of changes in the equipment acquisitions, fixed asset acquisitions minus depreciation, and a disposal of about $1 million in fixed assets. Our total liabilities decreased by 101.8 million. This was a net of debt service payments offset by an increase in OPEB liability. Questions?
For the audience, maybe you can tell them what OPEB means.
Other post-employment benefits, not our pension plan, but all of the other benefits. And we post the additional liability every year once we do the actuarial report that changes. There was a roughly between 24 and $25 million increase in the liability portion this year. That was due, I want to say almost 80% of that was due to a change in the mortality table that was used to evaluate the ongoing actuarial liability. Oops, So our statement of net position, which is our total assets plus deferred outflows minus total liabilities and deferred inflows of all of our agency resources combined, is at the end of this first quarter, we're just still remaining just under $2 billion. The unrestricted net position, which means the available cash that goes into maintaining our reserves and our working capital, is $159.4 million. So those are the results for the first quarter. Pretty good. Still heading in a positive way. Happy to answer any questions you might have. Okay.
Questions by board? Yes.
So the primary component of the report that you just gave that fits into our strategic financial plan is the unrestricted balance. As we think about, components of the strategic financial plan, as I'm looking at this, I think the primary key that relates to that strategic financial plan is that $159 million of unrestricted funds.
Right, that actually exceeds our 2.5 months of operating reserves. As I said, this does include that reserve, which is 2.5 months of operating capital, but it also is our working capital.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Good question. Other questions? No, thank you. That's a nice summary you've given there where we sit financially. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, well, that concludes, unless you have something else, Mr. John.
No, that concludes my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, so let's move on then to our consent agenda. For anybody watching this, we have 2 items on our consent agenda today. And these items are considered routine and usually administrative in action. However, any board member can remove any of the items from the consent agenda for questions or to be considered separately by just requesting such action prior to consideration of the board action on the agenda. So there's two items, as I said. There's one which is approving the minutes for the September 28th, 2016 meeting, and then there's a resolution 16-010-61, which is authorizing submission of 10 grant applications for fiscal year 2017 formula and discretionary funds from the Federal Transit Administration. So with that, is there any item on the consent agenda that a member of the board would like to have removed from the consent agenda?
Nope, remove adoption.
I have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
I think he might have been first then, okay? So we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none then, let's have a vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's move on to our normal business of resolutions. The first one is Resolution 16-10-62, which is authorizing contracts with 2C Building Services LLC, Snugs Pro Wash Incorporated, and GNL Janitorial LLC for bus shelter cleaning services. Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, as you know, we have something over 1,000 bus shelters in the system, and we have requests always for more of those. Those bus shelters sometimes need to be cleaned twice a day, sometimes once a day, sometimes multiple days, but all of them at least once a week. And so those are generally done at off-peak periods of time, and that is contracted work that we contract for. This was an opportunity to do amongst the policies that you generally set, which is to encourage small businesses to participate in our ongoing operations efforts. So there was an enormous effort of both outreach as well as trying to break the contracts down into meaningful bite-sized pieces so that smaller businesses, local businesses could participate in the procurement. I think as we went into this, we divided the contracts into really the 3 sections: West Region, Northeast Region, Southeast Region, and it then issued requests for proposals. As I noted, there was a great deal of outreach to small businesses and disadvantaged businesses and minority businesses, and received a number of proposals, and then went into the bid phase. And what I would note is that I think we have some excellent, frankly, to us, some newer contractors involved in this proposal, which is exactly, I think, what we want to see as a result out of this. And so we recommend that there be 3 contracts awarded. First of all, to 2C Building Services a 5-year contract. That will total in 5 years of services about $805,000. GNL janitorial, a little bit over $1 million, 1.1 million for the base year and the contract terms, and then Snuggs Pro Wash. What I would note about this is that when you add up all of these contracts, the value of the work is less, about 10% less than our independent cost estimate, so we believe we're getting good value out of this. We're using some good small businesses. 2C Building Services is a certified DBE. GNL is an emerging small business under state regulations, but is qualified to be a DBE, so we'll be working with them to make sure that they are certified in that regard. And Snuggs Pro Wash, not certified, but it's a local small business. So we think, again, from the diversity standpoint and from the standpoint of contracting local, this is a very good story, and recommend your approval. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Just one quick question. So is there a breakdown? I'm assuming that the 3 contracts and the 3 providers are specific to each of the regions?
Yes.
And then the scope of work or the amount of work is going to be different in each of the areas?
Right.
Okay, so I'm looking at the difference in contracting values, and I'm assuming that the contract value is specific to the scope of work required in that region.
Exactly, the number of shelters and the frequency of cleaning of those various shelters.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Other questions by the board?
I have a question. I guess I want to say I appreciate the detail in this report and the effort that went into bringing in new contractors. That's, very much appreciated. Was this originally one contract that has been divided into 3?
We've had various points in times, and I think originally we did have more combined contracts, but we have been trying to divide it up as every time we bring it out for bid again, we try to take another fresh look at the territories.
Are there other reasons to divide it up besides encouraging new contractors?
Well, certainly there's some efficiency associated with a basket of work in one geographic area, and so that's generally been our notion. And the other thing is sort of balance it between contractors so that we don't tax the value of one, or tax the capabilities of some of the smaller contractors above what, frankly, would be reasonable for them to provide.
Thank you.
I would also note, just FYI, that our facility management department does a great job of managing this, and they do a number of quality assurance checks on the contractors over time as well to make sure that the work is, and the shelters are clean on a regular basis. So, and it does require some adjustment over time. Sometimes some shelters do need to be upgraded in terms of the frequency of the cleaning based on the circumstances that we see in the world.
Other questions? Is the board ready to consider a motion to approve resolution 16-10-62?
So moved.
Have a motion. Is there a second? Have a second. Any further discussion? I want to thank you for the outreach and the work you did. It looks like you've got some great contractors, have some opportunity maybe to grow in this area. So good work. See no other comments. All those in favor of the motion to approve resolution 16-10-62 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Moving on then to resolution 16-10-63, which is authorizing a contract with Patinkin Research Strategies LLC for public opinion research services. Mr. General Manager.
Yes, Mr. Board President, members of the board, this is a contract to sort of help us understand what our voters and our riders want in terms of additional services from us. As we begin to look at regional strategies to begin to develop projects like the Southwest Corridor or the Powell Division Corridor, or develop other projects that meet the needs of our growing region, we believe it's very important to check in with our constituents on a regular basis, and the polling opportunities from Patinkin, I think, offer us that opportunity. In terms of the procurement, we did have a widely distributed proposal for this. Actually, 6 proposals were received in this regard. As we looked further, we shortlisted 3 and asked for improved proposals, if you will, from each of the 3. As we went through this, then basically have some very qualified firms with DHM Research, Patenkin, EMC Research. As we went through the predetermined categories of qualifications and balancing that with price, we found that Patenkin was most highly rated, largely because of the price, but also very highly qualified. And so while it was close, we think this is a very sound recommendation to you. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to respond to those.
Mr. President? Mr. General Manager, not so much a question as more as a statement and a caution again as we talk about diversity. And particularly as we move to using the quote unquote term emerging small businesses or minority owned emerging small businesses. In my experience back over the years, when that came up, that really becomes a code. That is going to be 100% white, and there's not really going to be diversity there, as we have in this particular case. We have 2 individuals, both who are white, nothing for diversity, and the diversity statement, the explanation is because of the specialization of the expertise. They don't plan to use any certified. This is the 21st century. We're no longer back in the 16th or the 17th. It's time for some of these companies to stop using that, and more often enough is that TriMet must not continue to accept that without asking and pushing that you intend to. We've had a lot of intentions over the year. TriMet has a great record. It's being used and touted as a model of diversity. I'm afraid that we're beginning to lose that as we do this and we don't work towards ensuring that as we go forward, we still have a use of diversity in these contracts that we're giving out.
So my assurance to you and my direction to the staff will be to do what you just described we do, which I think we do on a regular basis, which is to really work with our contractors to maximize the content from minority contractors in this work. There will be some opportunities as this work program develops to think about that with focus groups and other, so there may be some opportunity to bring in some subcontractors, and we'll be trying to emphasize those opportunities to the contractor as we move forward.
So I think maybe what Director Bethel is asking is maybe when we get this project underway, or maybe when we're mostly completed or whatever, maybe you could just give us a report of how they did utilizing their sub-consultants to address some of the concerns and issues that Dr. Bethel pointed out here.
Happy to do that.
Okay. Does that help?
That helps out.
Okay. Good comments, good comments. Any other comments or questions for Neil on this one? Then is there a motion to approve Resolution 16-10-63?
So moved.
We have a motion. We have a second?
Second.
Your second. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All right, then I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 16-10-63, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Resolution 16-10-64, which is authorizing a contract with Economic Consultants Oregon, DBA Eco Northwest, to provide economic forecasting and consulting services. Mr. General Manager.
Board President, members of the board, just to note that as we enter the budget season, which unfortunately for some of us, we are beginning to enter already, I would note that we always start with a forecast of our payroll tax revenues, our passenger revenues, and the other sources of revenue that run our agency. We have traditionally used an independent forecasting firm that sort of helps provide both to us and to you some independent validation of what that growth rate as we look to the future would be. And so to that extent, we have used in the past Eco Northwest as a contractor to provide us those forecasts on an annual basis. And so the forecast that you see and the budget that responds to that forecast is really based on the best sound economic data that we can possibly develop. And I would also note that we often bring in some extra eyes occasionally if there are particular questions on particular topics to look at our forecasts and our finances going forward. In this regard, we have issued an RFP for economic forecasting consulting services. These contracts do have a timeline of about 5 years that we do then procure them. Based on that, we actually received, at RFP, we actually received proposals from Eco Northwest, Moody's Analytics, and Northern Economics. The evaluation committee reviewed these, mostly staff from our finance department, looking at the experience of the firm, including workforce and diversity, the experience and qualifications of their key staff, and understanding the work, as well as price proposal. When we went through that, we actually found that 2 of those firms are really in the competitive range, Eco Northwest and Northern Economics, and both were interviewed and finally scored, opened the price proposals, and the highest ranked firm out of that was Eco Northwest. And again, they have provided these services for us in the past. The estimated contract amount is just about $200,000. But I would also note that in addition to those annual forecast updates, we also use them for some specialty work occasionally. You might recall that as we were evaluating, for example, the transfer time, we had Eco Northwest do some microeconomic analysis of the effect and the cost of that transfer time change. So there are some other specialty assignments that we do use Eco Northwest for as well, and would continue to, should you approve this contract. I would note, and I think this is parallel to the concern Dr. Bethel raised earlier related to diversity, which is that this is a specialty firm. They are diverse in their own nature in terms of their gender balance, not so much the minorities. But I would also note that they have begun an internship program, and we continue to work with them to broaden these efforts and strengthen these efforts over time. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, as would any perhaps experts in the audience.
Go ahead.
Neil, going back to the other resolution and Dr. Bethel's concerns, my concerns also, is any possibility of them potentially using some type of an intern from, say, over PSU or?
Yes.
So they can get some experience, get hands-on. Good, thank you.
And indeed, as sort of noted in the resolution, they are broadening those efforts and I think recognizing their responsibility to do that.
Good, thank you.
So we don't find an unwilling contractor in this regard in terms of working this topic.
We don't find an unwilling contractor, but realistically, we've been working with Eco Northwest for quite a number of years. And the discouragement that I feel at this point is that all the number of years we've been working for them, I mean, they've been working with us and encouraging them to create a more diverse workforce. It's quite frustrating that the many years we have been working with them, their diversity is pretty much nil, 2% minorities. And the fact that both Dr. Bethel and I are both African American, we're not just talking about African Americans, we're talking about, all minorities, and that's, as you look at that number, it's just startling that an organization that we've worked so closely with over the years has made little to no progress. I mean, when we look at the minority population here in the city of Portland, it's significantly greater than 2%. I think of companies like Stacy and Whitbeck, who have done a phenomenal job over the years that we've worked with them to broaden, the impact and the positivity that they bring to this region and to that industry to expand and make it more diverse. They're doing things like mentoring, other companies and smaller companies, to the degree that now, some of the folks that they've mentored are now working with them and sometimes competing with them on potential contracts. In this right here, the alarm that I see is how long we've been working with them, and they've made little progress in that regard. And so that's the component that, as you know, when we say to make change over time, my expectation individually would have been that would have taken effect at some point. And I think we've got to continue to send the message to the folks we work with that we've got to be more inclusive in our hiring practice, both now and well into the future. You know, so I'm saying this to the group that's here, but I'm also hoping that the folks over at Eco Northwest, you know, have an opportunity to grab a hold of what's being said here and understand, you know, kind of the frustration that we see of they do great work. So we're not challenging their work in that regard, but you know, it is quite discouraging to see the length of time we've been working with them to not have more progress. I certainly applaud their diversity as far as gender goes. That's impressive because we don't see that, you know, in many organizations. But you know, we've got to continue to encourage them to broaden their overall hiring practices and not just take another 5 or 10 years and another decade to see meaningful change.
If I might, I would be pleased to deliver that message personally to them.
Please do.
Thank you.
Good comments, very good comments. And in fact, I would say that the next time they come before us, they might be prepared to answer some questions on how they're doing about that. Okay. So we have a report, we have a recommendation from the staff. Is there, is the board ready to offer a motion to approve resolution 16-10-64? Have a motion?
I move.
Have a motion?
Second.
Second? Any further discussion? I think we hit the key point here on this one. I think it's been made clear. Did you have another comment?
So, you know, I'm actually going to vote no on the contract, and it's not to, again, I have great faith in Eco Northwest, but ultimately, I think if we don't start, you know, as a board, if we don't start to really send the message of our concerns, I think we continue down the path that we've always been on, and that's unacceptable as we move forward. So, I'm going to vote no on the resolution, and I hope that makes its way back to Eco Northwest. But again, they're a very talented organization. But again, the length of time we've been working with them, in my opinion, it's unacceptable that more movement hasn't been made.
Any other comments? Let's move on then to vote on the motion. All those then in favor of the motion to approve resolution 16-10-64, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
We have 3-2, the motion is approved. Thank you very much. I think that does send a pretty clear message to Eco Northwest, and again, I'd like to talk to them about that next time they come to us with a presentation.
Very good.
Thank you very much. All right.
Mr. President?
Yes,
As
you have,
mentioned, I have to leave.
thank you for sticking around for what you did. I appreciate it. You were excused. All right, then let's move on to resolution 16-10-65, which is authorizing a contract with Howard S. Wright for construction management general contractor services for elevator rehabilitation and replacement project. Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, you may recall that at one point in time, we did come to you with a resolution to authorize the CMGC process for this work. Again, over the next few years, we anticipate some major work in terms of rebuilding our elevator infrastructure. Some of that was, of course, installed with the Banfield project that opened in 1986, and other elements of it associated with the West Side project, particularly the zoo elevators and the Sunset Transit Center elevators. And we also have a number of elevators and lifts, if you will, freight elevators in all of our facilities that are also subject to regular review, rehabilitation, and at various points in times in their life replacement. So this is a contract to accomplish that work. And we break this into a couple of pieces, and the piece that you're considering right now is really for pre-construction services. The amount of the initial pre-construction services contract is $275,000. That allows the contractor to work with our staff and our designers to really finalize the work scope and the timeline, because again, putting these particular service elevators out of service is a major impact to our customers as we go through these construction processes. So we want to make sure that we're available for workarounds, and we're considering all the impacts associated with the elevator outages that may occur as part of this reconstruction program. So as we then work through the construction planning, we would come back with a much firmer price, which we estimate in total to be about $15 million at this point. And that firmer price would really be associated with the scope of work associated with the elevator's replacement or rehabilitation, whatever the case may be in the particular case. Related to the procurement, I would note that, again, that you approved previously the authorization for the CMGC style. We did advertise this proposal widely. Unfortunately, we received just one proposal from Howard S. Wright, or Balfour Beatty, as parent company of Howard S. Wright. We know them as we know them locally. And we believe that we received only one proposal because of very tight construction market, and that this is also very, there are a limited number of firms that actually do this kind of work associated with elevators, both because of the higher liability associated with it and the technical expertise associated with it. So we reviewed the proposal and found that it was actually very competitive and good service, and it's a firm we worked with before and have confidence in. And so we do, even with the limited competition, do recommend your approval. Again, initial pre-construction services of $257,000 roughly, and then a construction fee that has been calculated at $838,000 associated with the overall scope of work, which again, in wrapping all of that together, we expect to run about $15 million. We would come back to the board at a second, for a second authorization of that increase from where we are today to the full construction scope. So at that point in time that we have that pricing determined, we'd come back to the board for additional approval. With that, I would just also just note that Howard S. Wright has expected DBE participation in the amount of at least 10%. Also, one of the things we do during this pre-construction services is work with them on their contracting plan to really maximize that number. We've been very successful in the past of working with our partner firms in this area to actually grow that above what their initial estimate would be, and I hope that will be the case in this case, in this situation. So with that, I'd be happy to answer your questions, refer them to our staff who actually know something more than I do, and recommend your approval.
We're on a roll here. You want to have questions here? I guess I would have questions. So when we come back to us with the actual contract of construction amounts, I assume at that time the contractor will have their subs and workforce make up much more firm than they have it today. So I make it clear we'd like to see that, and we would like to see some clear efforts to increase above and beyond the level that they've indicated here in their proposal.
Message received.
Okay. Any further comments? Suggestions? Okay. All those, excuse me, I need a motion in. Is there a motion in to approve Resolution 16-10-65?
So moved.
A motion, is there a second?
Second?
I have a second. Is there any further discussion? All right, all those then in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 16-10-65, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Moving on, then, Resolution 16-10-66, which is also a contract with Howard S. Wright for the construction manager, general contractor services for the Washington Park Station Improvement Project.
Mr. Board, members of the board, you might recall that in our capital improvement program was an effort to spruce up the Washington Park Station, which has been used pretty hard since we opened up the West Side Light Rail line in 1998. Again, we have advertised after your approval of authorization for a CMGC procurement for contractors to assist us with that. We have a design effort that has been advanced. What we'd like to do is work with the contractor on pricing that design option, which will look at the finishes and the level of work and the scope of work and make sure that that's properly sized to the budget. And would again come back to you for that final approval once we get to that point. We did have competitive proposals in this area. Howard S. Wright or Balfour Beatty as the parent company, Turner Construction and Emmerich Construction, all excellent firms. So we were very pleased to get that level of competition on this particular proposal. The pre-construction services price as recommended by Howard S. Wright was about $19,000. So that is essentially the amount that is committed right now, plus should we be successful in signing a construction contract, the construction fee services of about $62,000. Again, we believe that the overall price for this work is something on the order of $1.3 million when we're done. But again, this is another one where we wanted to make sure there was very close coordination and planning with our operations, with our customers that use the line to access the Forestry Center, Children's Museum, the zoo, and other Washington Park attractions. So the timing of it is going to be critical, and how we actually do these services so that we can keep the station open while some of the remodeling is going on is all very important, and why, again, the CMGC procurement we think is important, and working with the contractor prior to the construction effort to make sure that's well coordinated is also very important. So related to the diversity, again, we received an estimate from Howard S. Wright of 15% participation. And as we noted before, we will continue to work with the contractor to maximize that participation as we move forward. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or but do recommend your approval.
As per the last contract, when you come back with us, you'll come up with tell us what it looks like the real numbers will be in terms of participation.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? For those who can ask questions. Is there then a motion to approve Resolution 16-10-66?
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second? Second here. Is there any further discussion? We have a motion and a second on the floor to approve Resolution 16-10-66, which is the contract with Howard S. Wright. Is there any further discussion or questions? All right, then I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 16-10-66, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Moving on then to Resolution 16-10-67, which is authorizing the contract with CVE Technologies Group for network and closed-circuit TV assessment. Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, this is actually a little bit of a story, and actually we have IT staff here to talk to you, but actually it's fairly timely. If you might recall the story about security outages of the internet over the last week or so, you realize that CCTV cameras are a big part of that. This isn't so much about security, but it is noting that the CCTV system that we have and upgrading to digital format from analog format, and the spread of this technology is putting a strain on our network, together with the need to make sure that communications network is responsive to the e-fare system and the validators and all of that. As we implemented e-fare, we did make some improvements on the network overall, but because of the sort of additional load of the CCTV system, we wanted to do another review of our network capability and see if there were any weak links in that overall system. It's very hard to find people who are very experienced in this. You should know that we have, I'm not sure quite what the mileage is, but over 60 miles of fiber optic links throughout the region. So we are a major, ourselves, telecommunications carrier, and again, assessing the ability of that network to absorb all the demand that we're putting on it is an important technical aspect that our IT department needed some outside resources on. When we went to bid on this, we found one firm that was really qualified to do this, which was CVE, which is the firm recommended here. And they came in with a relatively high price proposal for that initially. We thought that was too high and wanted them to review their pricing and actually paid them to do an initial phase one work, which was under the board's threshold for contracting. As that additional evaluation was done by our IT staff and CVE, the value of the services that we needed did diminish the price, and we were able to get more specific about the technical work that needed to be done and hone in on a lower price, saving from the initial proposal, if I'm remembering, about 72,000. So at this point in time, we'd like to continue with these services and would request the board's approval of this contract. The total contract amount would be $177,000. Again, the initial proposal did help us hone in on the exact work that needed to be done to reduce the overall price and scope of work associated with that. This is a very specialty firm. They do all the work themselves. They have, obviously an attempt. The diversity of the workforce is reported in your report, but no subcontracting opportunities with this particular work. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and recommend your approval.
Questions, Mr. Rodriguez?
I do have a question. This is from Director Prosser. It's an excellent question, but I can't take credit for it. Will the work also address earthquake resiliency in the system?
This, I don't know if it will or not, but that is an important issue that we are beginning to pay a lot more attention to throughout the agency. So AJ's telling me no, this contract does not do that by itself. I would note that we have hired a new emergency manager recently who is helping us focus our scope of works on all of these items as we go through it on resilience, which we agree is important.
Other questions?
I guess I do have another question, which is this concerns about the capacity of the system, I assume is an ongoing concern.
Yes.
But this is a one-time kind of review.
Right. But I think it would be fair to say that the intent of it is to really give us a roadmap about other places where we need additional capacity. Sometimes this isn't in the actual fiber cables themselves. Sometimes it's in the communication junctions and the, if you will, the servers that begin to provide this overall network of services. So I think the goal would be not only do we have enough capacity for what we're planning now, but how much bandwidth do we have left for growth?
Did you get your questions answered?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Is the board ready to offer a motion to approve Resolution 16-10-67?
So moved.
Have a motion? Is there a second?
Yes, sir.
Have a second. Is there any further discussion? With that, then I'll call for a vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 16-10-67, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion is approved unanimously. So, Mr. General Manager and Board, that's the last item I see on our regular business meeting. Is there anything else to come before the, I guess there is.
I just wanted to make that one note that when you called for the vote on Resolution 1610-64, the Eco Northwest, you'd noted that the vote was 3-2, but it was actually 4-2.
Oh, it was 4-2. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right. So with that, is there any other information to come before the board or any more business? Seeing none then, I will adjourn the business meeting. And we have a briefing following this. I think we ought to take about a 5 or maybe 10-minute break before we start the briefing. Is that okay? 10 minutes? 10 minutes, all right. To have Harry come up, Supporter come up and give us a little update on some of the assaults.
Yes, sir. And so I'll let Harry take a few minutes, hopefully at the outset of the briefing, just to bring you up to date on our continuous improvement team and the efforts we've been taking.
Thank you. It's very much appreciated.
So I will provide the board members periodic updates if that's the pleasure of the board. We have assembled a continuous improvement team to address this particular issue and have been meeting since July of this year. As the general manager said earlier, we have already launched a assault awareness and prevention program that is part of our recertification program. We are also looking at other programs as well because we want to take a very holistic approach to preventing assaults on our operators and our other employees. We're also looking at the current legislation to see what it says, and we have proposed a revision to that. A number of the members on the CIT are e-board members as well from ATU. We are also working with them, so I will be contacting Shirley Block, President Block, soon to see if we can coordinate our efforts to have a revision to the legislation, to the statute. We have 3 protective barriers that will be installed, I hope, next month for testing purposes. This is an opportunity to have for the operators to see it firsthand and to give feedback. And based upon those responses, then we'll have to develop a plan forward as to, do we expand this? And if so, what does it really look like? So there are a number of efforts. There is a complete work plan that I can share with the board as well, if that's the pleasure. And but I think we're making progress. Yes, it's going to be somewhat slow because there are many components to addressing the assault issue.
Thank you, Harry. So is there any, and it's going to be something that's highly subjective, but is there any idea of, from criminologists or whatever, psychologist that has any insight on the rise in assaults against operators? Because as Neil referenced, it's something that's not just happening here in the Portland metro region, but Seattle has seen a rise, and across the country we've seen an uptick in this type of behavior.
So I can't answer that question specifically, but because I don't know. But there was a national committee that was assembled which advises the Federal Transit Administration on a variety of safety issues. I am a member of that committee. I also participated as a member of the sub-working group on transit worker assaults. There was a white paper that was developed, and we made a number of recommendations to the FTA. We are using that white paper as guidance in developing our work plan. As I said, it involves a number of components, which only training is just one of those components. The protective barriers is just one of those components. There are several components. There's also something called the Transit Cooperative Research Program. There's a report on operator assaults. This is a branch of the Transit Research Board. So it is a problem that is not unique to TriMet or this metropolitan area. It is a national problem that we're trying to address. But we're trying to learn from other transit agencies as well. And so we're looking at a variety of components, and we are taking a very eclectic approach to this issue.
All right, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Again, thank you. You might just send to the board if you got any information on the plan, rather than make a presentation. But maybe the next time you're up, you can give us an update on any just the data. And I'd like to know kind of the root cause of some of the assaults, if there's any of that understood. Like is there something that triggers that, and just trying to understand why our drivers get into that situation or are allowed to get into that situation.
Well, I'd be pleased to share that information.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. General Manager, you want to introduce the folks coming up, talk about the regional transportation regional transit strategy?
Thrilled to. I'd like to actually introduce Metro Councilor Craig Dirksen, who chairs the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation, and also Jamie Snook from Metro staff, and obviously Eric Hessa from our own staff. And just to note that we are working closely with Metro and all of our regional partners on a regional transit strategy, which will be one of the key components of the update of the regional transportation plan that's due for consideration in 2018. And so a lot of work is going on right now about that. And I note that I think the work that we've done with our service enhancement plans provides a really good foundation for that work. The question, though, is really as you look at a regional transportation plan, you're looking out a couple of decades. And so where does this all take us? And where do we need to go? So clearly we have a lot of work going on in Southwest Corridor and the Powell Division Corridor, but we also need, as a regional agency and as a partner agency with Metro, to look even beyond that. What's next, and how do we continue to grow our regional transit system and meet the needs of this very aggressively and strongly growing region? So with that, again, I'd like to introduce JPAC Chair Craig Dirksen. Craig, thank you for being here. And then I think we'll be followed with Jamie and Eric in terms of providing a little bit more detail on this topic.
Thanks, Neil. Good morning, President Warner and members of the board. Thank you for having us today to give you an update on what the regional transit strategy. Metro has recently kicked off its regional transportation plan update process. This is a regional plan that we are required to update every 4 years, which is required by federal statute. The regional transportation plan sets our long-term policies and vision for how our transportation system works overall, including our road and highway plans, our transit plan, and our active transportation plan. Projects must be in the RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan, in order to receive federal funding of any sort, which means that Metro must certify that these projects meet our regional transportation and land use goals, because Metro is required to also incorporate our long-term land use and environmental goals into our RTP process. This means we're required to show progress toward our regional and state goals in those areas, in addition to building regional consensus around our transportation vision. The early part of the RTP process began last year with stakeholder work groups and a series of regional leadership forums. The third of these forums is December 3rd, where we start talking about our transportation priorities, and we would love to see a strong engagement from the board at that meeting. As part of the RTP process, Jamie Snook is in charge of updating our regional transit vision. This means not only identifying our high-capacity transit priority areas, but also working with TriMet, SMART, the City of Portland, and others to identify strategies and develop implementation plans to make transit more frequent, more convenient, more accessible, and more affordable. This has been and will continue to be a collaborative effort. This is an interesting time for transit in our region. We're in the middle of unprecedented growth, and no matter where you go, you hear from people who are frustrated with the amount of time that they're spending in traffic, or that rush hour lasts longer than it used to be, or that the air pollution near their home is worse than ever. These are real problems, but people are increasingly seeing transit as a big part of that answer. They want more transit service, they want more transit lines, more space dedicated to transit to try to solve the problem. But at the same time, for the first time in a couple of decades, we have no major transit capital project in the federal pipeline. Now, with the Southwest Corridor Light Rail Plan and the Division Street BRT plan in the works, we're working on it. But we need to take advantage of this moment and the attention that transportation and transit has in the public mind to make sure that as we grow, we're growing in a way that is consistent with our values and with the goals that we have as a region. We can all envision what we want our region to look like in 20 years. We want a thriving economy that supports workers of all incomes, that allows for creativity and entrepreneurship. We want people to be able to live close to where they work and play. We want to protect our quality of life and minimize our impact on the environment. We need frequent, convenient, accessible, and affordable transit to make that kind of growth possible and at the same time preserve our quality of life. Now, of course, we all know that will require funding. And we here at Metro are here to work with you to identify our revenue needs for the next 20 years and explore ways to get there. Across the country, areas like Seattle and Los Angeles, Atlanta, Houston, San Francisco are investing literally billions of dollars to be able to deliver the transit system that their communities need and deserve. We need to think about whether or not our region is ready for that kind of investment. Let's envision the region we want and figure out how to make it possible rather than being constrained by our current limitations. We appreciate the chance to talk to you about the RTP, and now I will turn it over to Jamie to continue the conversation from here. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks for having us. Thank you, Councilor Dirksen, for the introduction. So we are here to talk about the regional transit strategy and the RTP update. So I know in your packet you have our fall fact sheet on the regional transit strategy. It gives a little bit of an overview of where we are. I'm going to give a little bit more definition to that in today's presentation. So the regional transit strategy really has been a collaborative effort. So Eric and I have been working really closely on how to envision this, how to implement it, and how to get it going. And it's been really fun to work with Eric at TriMet and Stefan Lashbrook at SMART and Dan Bauer at the Portland Streetcar and others. We've also engaged transit providers from outside the region that come in and out of the region, like C-Tran and Salem Kaiser and Sandy Area Metro and Canby Area Transit and Ride Connection and others. We're not starting from scratch, and we know that, and it's really been building off of the efforts that we've been doing over the past few years. So, for example, the TriMet Service Enhancement Plan really is the basis, and we're building up from that. And we're also building off of the work that we've done as a region on the Climate Smart Strategy. All of these things are coming together to build this overall transit vision. And really what we're trying to do is develop a clear path forward towards implementation. So developing a really compelling vision that we can implement. And this really acts as the transit modal component of the RTP as well as an overall regional strategy. So a little bit on the RTP. We are halfway through our RTP timeline. So we've been looking at identifying the challenges that we're facing today and looking at the needs that we think we're going to face in the future and looking at what kind of available funding might be there to help us move a vision forward. There's a lot of technical work that's going on to help us into the next year and looking at, well, what is that vision that we want to develop and help building up that shared investment strategy. We remain on track to adopt the plan in 2018, so good job. Also as part of the RTP, it's a good time to kind of step back. So if you start thinking about the 2040 growth concept, we're nearly halfway into our 50-year vision, and so it's a good time to kind of ask ourselves the question of how are we doing, how's it working, what's changed, and where do we go from here? And so these are some really big questions that we're going to be looking at through the RTP. This is looking at a lot of the regional challenges and needs that we've heard from through this process so far. I'm sure these resonate with you all and probably are some of the same things that you're hearing from the people that you work with and talk to. So our job is really going to be to build a vision that addresses these challenges. That's no easy task. And then working with you all and the region to help implement that vision. Also, we expect that the funding gap is going to grow in this RTP. Our system is getting older, our population and our economy is growing, and puts a lot more demand on our system. And the funding landscape is changing. We can't rely on federal and state funds to help support, build, or implement our vision. And we're not alone. There's regions all over the country that are going through the similar challenges. So it's going to be up to us to figure out how we're going to build this and how we're going to pay for it. And regions all around the country are looking at how to raise money locally to help build out their vision. So that was a little bit of snapshot of the RTP, the big picture look. I'm going to focus more now on the regional transit vision. I think you heard Councilor Dirksen say that really what our vision statement is to make transit more frequent, convenient, accessible, and affordable. And that means aligning our frequency and our transit types to the needs that are out there, both the existing needs and the projected needs. And then convenient is looking at making sure that that transit is a viable option, it's competitive with the cars, that we build the speed and reliability into our system that makes it more viable and more attractive to increase transit ridership. And accessible, making sure that there's good and safe walking and biking to our transit stops and stations, making sure that there's good crossings between stops and access to the places that we want to go, we want to work, live, play, basically all those places that we need to meet our daily needs, that we can get there. And then affordable, and making sure that it's affordable, particularly for those who depend on it the most. So we're going to be looking to be developing a vision, and that's going to be the plan. And then we're going to be working to figure out how do we prioritize and how do we implement that. And our thought is that we have currently a system expansion policy, but we're looking at updating that system expansion policy to be the prioritization tool to help us move transit projects forward. And that's more on the capital investment side of things, and particularly the projects that are looking for small starts and new starts federal funding that are going to be at the regional table asking for support. Our regional transit vision, we see this as being three major components. One is the transit service, the other is the capital investments, and the third is the transit supportive elements. The regional transit vision starts with the transit service, and it's building off of the current and future planning that you all are doing with the service enhancement plan, and that the City of Portland's doing with their streetcar expansion plans, and SMART is doing with their master plan process. That this really is the responsibility of the transit providers to start figuring out where they want to be in the future and how do we help them. And you can see that there's a lot of partners on that list of people that we're working with to help develop this vision. The second is the part of the vision is the capital investments. So we have our current high capacity transit plan, and we're moving forward with the top priorities of that plan with the Southwest Corridor and the Division BRT. But we know that there needs to be updates to that high capacity transit plan, and then this emerging idea of the enhanced transit corridors, which is looking at those corridors that are more than frequent service, but not quite the light rail investment, but definitely corridors that warrant and need more capital investments in them to make them run more efficiently and better. And what those type of improvements look like is, transit signal priority or wider stop spacing, transit stop amenities, maybe bigger buses, that kind of thing. Transit only lanes where needed. And then the transit supportive elements is really looking at how do we make sure that people can walk and bike to the stops and stations, make sure that we're talking about that first and last mile. That's the big conversation that comes up whenever we talk about transit. And then making sure that we're integrating the ITS and the technology that's out there. It's emerging all the time, and how do we include that? The shared mobility concept, how does that coordinate and work with our transit system? And then also the land use plans of the local jurisdictions in the region. And then how do we coordinate and make sure that the transit-oriented development investments are there and linked to the transit improvements that we're going to make? And how do we align with our affordable and equitable housing strategies? So these are all important pieces to making sure that the transit system works. So this is just, again, reminding you all of the 3 different components to the transit vision. So how do we implement that? And there's no one way to implement it. So we talked about the 3 different pieces of the transit vision, and it's going to take the whole region to step up and put it together and implement this. So the transit service is really the responsibility of the transit providers. And so you all have your service enhancement plan prioritization process, and that's how we can move transit service forward annually. And then when we start talking about the capital investment side of things, it's really partnership building. So there's going to be some stuff that the local jurisdictions need to do to be able to make some of these improvements happen. Sometimes it might be a partnership with TriMet and the local jurisdictions, or sometimes it might be a regional lift. And so we're really looking at the transit system expansion policy to be that prioritization tool to help drive and move those things forward. And then the transit supportive elements is also one of those same sort of things where it's a combination of sometimes it's going to be the locals' responsibility to do something, but sometimes it might be more about partnerships, and sometimes it might be more about the regional group coming together to put this into motion. So that was my real quick presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Eric to follow up.
Thanks, Jamie. So yeah, as we look ahead, just to note, I have been our lead on the RTP in general, as well as this transit strategy. And as I think Jamie and Chair Dirksen made clear, this really has been a deeply collaborative effort that builds on our work. And so, but from TriMet's perspective, I think we're very pleased that they're recognizing the work that has been done and really trying to validate and embed that into this. But importantly, I think this process will help extend the impact and effectiveness of that effort, because Metro really can convene a broader set of players at the table and really help to build into its policy as we then prioritize investments in the region, those partners that are really working with us to make the land use choices, to make the street design choices, and other policy and programmatic investments that really help to build ridership. And we have a number of strong partners there, but I think this is going to make clearer, maybe for a broader set of actors, the roles that they can play to help make their communities ready and supportive of transit, which makes it easier for us to then make our investment choices, because we know we don't have all the money we'd love to put everywhere, and so we need to find the folks that are going to help leverage that the most strongly. It also really is a direct continuation of the climate smart strategy, which we've briefed you on in the past, and that very clearly sees more and better transit as a key deliverable to deliver our climate smart vision for the future. And so this really is the next key step to implementing that vision, having some of the more difficult conversations about how do we get there and implement it, as Chair Dirksen and Jamie have noted. So as we now move forward into the next steps of really kind of developing and finalizing this vision for consideration, for updating this system expansion policy, and I'll note that we've worked together to secure from the state a transportation growth management grant, which is enabling us to bring in some consultants to help do additional technical work, which is really great. I'm serving on the project management team of that, so we'll again be very synced up and collaborative as we do that. But as that work goes forward, and will have implications for how we decide the next high capacity transit projects moving forward, we'll want to be talking with you as well. And then overall, as we reflect this vision in this transit strategy into the overall RTP, we really do want to find from you, how do you want to be involved? How much do you want to be kept up to speed? With what regularity would you like briefings to be able to get more into this? I know Craig spends a fair amount of time at Metro and is paying attention, but we want to make sure we're providing you the right level of information. So I hope to get your feedback on that today. And specifically, if there are particular goals or outcomes that you'd like to see from this process that we make sure that we're delivering at the regional table, I'd love to hear that either now or in the future. And then to turn it to you maybe for any immediate questions or thoughts that you have based on this presentation that we can answer.
And poor Director Prosser can't speak.
I know.
So pretty hard for him to make comments. But are there comments, questions on this topic? Very important topic. Please.
Thank you for the presentation. It's great to get the update. And Councilor Dirksen, thank you for coming and giving us your perspective. I think from my perspective as a board, I think as we move forward with this, and you're right, this is a very, very important process that we've got to engage in at every level to ensure that, we've got the solutions required to achieve what we need to achieve, but then also the resources. As I look at this, I sit on the Finance and Audit Committee and, as part of the group that helped develop and design our strategic financial plan. Major components of this will depend heavily upon our ability to garner the resources and strategically leverage the resources we have to move forward the efforts that we need to develop and implement these solutions. So those are and that's a key area that I see when you've referenced, Eric, in regards to how often or what level. And I think, it needs to be fairly regular, at least at the committee level, to ensure that we're looking at this stuff and have some clear line of sight. I know as Dee and her team looks to forecast and project out the needs as we move forward, we have to look at bonding and all of these things and potential FTA request. All of those things are going to be impacted by what needs to be done here to continue to develop the solution. And then also innovation can't be left out of this conversation. What does it look like? Just yesterday I read at first it was a very alarming article where the first semi delivered beer autonomously. Now, I can see President Warner is excited about that. Beer for all. Yeah, and so it's 120 miles of autonomous truck going down the road. You think about that, and you're like, wow, really? But I guess they did it in the wee hours of the morning, low traffic. But essentially, there was a driver in the sleeper cab, but it took the truck and the beer all the way to its final location without any driver involvement. So as we look at that, as we look at those things, I think some of the things that Neil and the team are being made aware of as we move forward and have partnerships need to be included in the conversation. And how do we make sure we move all of it forward appropriately and effectively to achieve the outcomes we need to? So I said a lot of stuff and probably only a little bit even had impact or relevance, but certainly as we look at how do we stay engaged, I don't know how regular it is, but certainly we need to be well informed as to what the impacts are going to be on the decisions that we make both now in the medium term and in the long term of how we can be a great resource.
Thank you. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'll just note, actually, the timing for that is good. We are still, I also serve on the Finance Committee, and I'm working closely with Dee's team there to make sure that they sync up with our long-range forecasts and then we identify any gaps that we are anticipating because more and more people want more and more of what we do, which is great. But we'll absolutely work through the committee structure that. I think it'll be a great way to then determine maybe from those committees when a good time to bring information to the full board would be. But we'll absolutely do that, and that's just coming up in the next few months. So we'll look to see when we can get on your agenda with some tangible information that you could review.
I hear Director Prosser likes to be at a meeting every other day.
It's true. He and I do like to see each other. Yes.
And I can say those things because he can't respond.
I will just note, too, on the innovation, as Neil and Craig know from the last Regional Leadership Forum, that was a focus of that conversation. And, in fact, this RTP recognizes the need for the region to develop a vision for how we want that to play a role in our lives. And I think that's something that our general manager has been very clear about, is that we can harness this tool to deliver the outcomes we want, or we might get harnessed by it if we don't make some decisions and indicate where we're trying to go. And so hopefully that's a conversation we can engage you all in as well.
Thank you.
I have a question. Actually, it's about the scope of your work, since I'm relatively new on the board. Sure. You have the graph that references to growing needs and limited revenues, and in particular, gas tax revenues being a challenge going forward. Is it part of the scope of your work to think about on the state level how to replace those revenues, or whether you want to replace those revenues?
So I think broadly speaking, I think yes, we alone are not going to be leading or developing that conversation, but clearly this vision is paying attention to that conversation. I'm embedded within our public affairs division, and so working with Bernie and others there, Aaron Dees, who you may know from our legislative work, to make the case based on the regional vision and frankly, the climate smart strategy was a state requirement for us to determine in the region how we could meet some state goals. I think a big part of our message now is we've come up with the plan, but what it needs is more investment in transit. So where is your role in that conversation? I think that is something we hope to see as part of the transportation package conversation this spring. So I think that's one key connection there. And then again, I am, as our RTP lead, will be liaising to the finance conversations, which will be more specifically defining how much do we need, both for transit investment, but across all of our modal investments. And then from that, we hope as a region, I think, to work together in Salem and in Washington, D.C. To make the case that we need more and stronger investments in our priority areas.
I might just add that I think the RTP work is really the foundation for all of that. It is the fundamental, sort of touchstone that we go to in terms of defining the needs and the objectives that the region has related to transportation. But it also guides more than just TriMet. It guides Metro, guides ODOT, it guides the counties and the cities. So all have a role in implementing the regional transportation plan. So to that end, you know, Chair Dirksen actually just brought together a sort of what we call the JPAC Finance Committee, and have been meeting, you know, essentially quarterly, maybe a little bit more frequently than that. And, yeah, please. Yeah, feel free. Yeah, this is fine.
Thank you, if I may. As we look at updating the regional transportation plan, we use that updated transportation plan to then determine what our priorities are going to be for the next funding round. And so in a sense, we kind of have two RTPs. We have the regional transportation plan, that's all the things we need. And then there's what we call the fiscally constrained RTP, which means this is the stuff that we could reasonably expect to be able to afford to do. And in recognizing the large disparity there, we're talking about how we would address that and how do we meet the needs that we have. Part of that conversation is with the subcommittee of JPAC that I have formed to discuss that issue, has been to try to formulate something and have input into what the legislature will perhaps consider during the next legislative session for a transportation funding plan. And then based on that, and a new part of the conversation that we've never really had before is based on what we see the federal government do with the FAST Act and what we see the legislature might do with a state transportation package, what might we do as a region to go to the voters and look for a regional funding source to kind of backfill what we will not get from the federal government or from the state government. We've never had that conversation, a serious conversation with regard to that before. And there's a lot of support around our region for the idea that that's something we need to do. It would give us better local control over how that money is spent and where we spend it, and also allow us to address issues with both on the highway system and in transit, and particularly something that we've not really addressed seriously before also, and that's active transportation. How do we provide people with safe routes to school, good access to transit? There's many areas in the region where people cannot get that first mile from their home to transit because of dangerous pedestrian facilities and whatnot. So being able to consider a regional funding measure as well to supplement what we would get from the feds and from the state government is something that we're having a serious conversation about. And we'd be able to react to what comes out of Salem in 2017 to see what we would need to do.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Maybe I could just comment on that too. Since I had the pleasure of serving on the Governor's Transportation Vision Task Force, which is really looking at the long term and the 4-year kind of plan in terms of funding. And what I would say was really an aha for me is this committee and went around the state and they heard from all parts of the state about what priorities were. And of course, the #1 priority was maintenance and preservation of the system we have now. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer, right? Everybody understands that. But the next two things in every one of the regions, whether you're on the Oregon coast, in the farthest reaches of east part of the state, in the valley, Medford, or here, the other top 2 priorities were transit and, believe it or not, congestion in the Portland metro area. They said that. Those were the things that popped up as priorities. And, you know, there's a joint legislative committee that has been also going around the state and we'll probably be looking after the elections about what we should be doing. But it's amazing to me because I hear the same thing when I'm in Washington County talking to business folks, community folks. They all want more transit, which is really the first time I've ever heard them say that they know and recognize and want more transit. They also think there's a few key priority highway projects that need to be addressed and corridors that need to be addressed. And when I talk to them about funding, what they usually come up with is, why don't you just raise the gas tax 10 cents a gallon? And then when I explain to them, and I'm doing this for the benefit of anybody watching this on TV or on their computer, is that in Oregon, any fee or tax that's related to the ownership and operation of a motor vehicle has to be spent on highways and bridges. Can't be spent on transit. And when you say that to them, it's kind of like, oh, I understand the problem a bit more, and some of the stuff that Councilor Dirksen talked about is going on around the rest of the United States. Most of these states have a sales tax, and they're asking their constituents, so they want to put 0.25% for transit, and that's what's going on up in the Seattle area, and I'm looking forward to see how they do. But I think their traffic congestion is so bad, they all understand that it's something they've got to do. So I suspect they'll be successful in this new issue that's on the ballot. So I think we've got some challenges in the state here that we don't have elsewhere, but we need to get creative. We need to figure out how to do this, and we need to figure out how to enhance all the modes, whether it's active transportation, highways, transit. They're all important, and they've got to work together. We're gonna fail. So I'm looking forward to seeing the regional transportation plan and this transit component of that, and how we can actually figure out how to get innovation, but also, quite frankly, build some more excitement for transit and investments in transportation in the future. So I'm kind of bullish on that I think the public is being very receptive right now and understands the need, because frankly, it's palpable out there in terms of when you drive down some of the roads and streets in the region. That's something that has to be improved. So I'm looking forward to some dialogue in the next few months about how we can make progress, and it'll be difficult, but I think we need to have those conversations. So keep at it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right.
Second topic, I'd like to ask Chris Connor and Darlene Guest now to come up, please, and give you a brief update on our Ethics Point hotline work. Just by way of background, you might remember from one of the recommendations from the Secretary of State's audit was that we establish a hotline for employees to contact, employees or other interested parties to contact us regarding complaints of fraud or abuse. And what we try to do is, obviously, we respond to any of those comments that we get in real time, but we want to give you an annual update, at least, of any of the issues that come across. So with that, Chris, take it away.
Actually, I'll go ahead and take
Darlene's starting. Okay, very good. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Board President Warner, members of the board, and General Manager Neil McFarland for giving us an opportunity to make a presentation this morning. We really appreciate it. We gave a presentation, as Neil mentioned, last year in October, and we wanted the opportunity to be able to provide you guys with an update since that time. And as Neil mentioned, as a quick reminder, in 2013, the Secretary of State recommended that TriMet consider implementing a hotline or other function to enable employees to make reports of fraud, waste, or abuse of district resources. And in response to that recommendation, the Board of Directors authorized the creation of the Accountability Committee. The members of the Accountability Committee includes board member Dr. T. Allen Bethel, General Counsel Shelley Devine, myself, and 2 others, and we were charged with the responsibility of implementing the hotline. In September of 2014, the Ethics Point hotline went live. The hotline is a resource for all TriMet employees. Employees can make reports anonymously. After the report is completed, the reporter is given a unique code, and with the password that they create, they can check back again after about 5 or 6 business days to check back on the status of their report. They can provide additional information at that point, and they can also ask questions. The hotline and the web page are hosted by a third-party independent vendor. And the link to the hotline can be accessed via TriNet, which is our intranet, or the employees can go directly to the website itself. Now, who is involved? As I mentioned, the Accountability Committee. They're charged with implementing and overseeing the hotline. The legal department, they help to administer the hotline, and they're also responsible for allocating the various reports to the responsible departments for research and resolution. The Internal Audit Department, they're charged with the responsibility of researching all reports that relate to potential fraud, waste, or abuse of district resources. And finally, NAVEX, who is our third-party independent firm.
NAVEX is responsible for receiving and capturing through the different channels, and that can include either by telephone or online, the various reports, and they're also responsible for capturing the information into a centralized database. And to date, this marks the 2nd-year anniversary of the Ethics Point Hotline. But since our last year's reporting, we've had one report of potential fraud, waste, and abuse. And for this report, internal audit researched and worked with the responsible department to resolve the concern and also to develop a management action plan to prevent its reoccurrence. We've also had 3 other types of reports that were forwarded to other departments, such as the Safety Committee, IT, or Legal for research and or resolution. Now, all 4 cases were reported anonymously, and 3 out of the 4 reporters were actively engaged in the process, and they were participating through online conversations with us and providing us additional information. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn the remaining portion of the presentation to Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Darlene. That brings us to analyzing the hotline, along with outlining what our goals were for 2016 and what our goals are looking forward. So in 2016, we focused on 3 goals for educating, engaging, and bringing trust to our employees in general and to reporters specifically who use the hotline. The first was to update our promotional materials. With launching the hotline in 2014, we did provide frequently asked questions sections about alternate methods and alternate departments to reach out to if a concern was not necessarily about fraud, waste, or abuse of resources. As part of our goals for 2016, we added that updated information to additional materials, promotional flyers, and methods of contact in order to spread the word and increase awareness. So I would say that was successful. We would note, however, that there is still a large number of reports that come in that do not focus solely on fraud, waste, or abuse of resources. This increased outreach and education is not meant to stop those reports from coming into the Ethics Point hotline. Rather, particularly if the Ethics Point hotline and its anonymous ability to make reports and to follow up is a significant factor in a reporter choosing to make the report in the first place, we think it is an entirely valuable use of resources to have reports come in that aren't necessarily about fraud, waste, or abuse. The second was to make sure that our promotional materials allowed for information to encourage our reporters to check back in, to increase that level of engagement. As Darlene pointed out, I believe that that's incredibly successful for this year, given that 3 out of 4 of the reports that came in did have frequent check-ins by the reporter. All 4 of the reports did use the online portal, and for our engagement, that meant that the reporters were able to actually upload documents or answer our questions electronically that investigations or investigators could follow up on. For the numbers being less important than trends, we really wanted to look at those trends, and one of the major ones that appeared was the value that reporters were putting on being able to report anonymously. One of the goals that was brought forward at our last summary report was to check on follow-up for how our reporters were feeling that their cases were being resolved. And allowing this portal to be open and active and allow that follow-up did show, one, that people did feel engaged, they did feel trusting that their issue was being resolved, but also it did provide that opportunity for feedback for what they were valuing with the Ethics Point hotline and why they had reached out in the first place. So for our focus in 2017, our push is really to delve in to track and analyze the hotline's use and its feedback. I think we've been very successful with our updated materials and flyers and want to definitely maintain that same level of awareness and education. But we definitely want to keep track of 3 ratios or trends that might help guide what is really valuable about the hotline for our employees. The first two things to track are definitely the continuing ratio of reports that come in about fraud, waste, or abuse of resources, and those that are to be redirected to another department. That, I believe, is tied with the ratio of the number of anonymous reporters. And the combination of those two values might help guide us in figuring out what exactly it is that the hotline is providing for our employees, particularly if it is the only source of anonymous reporting. As I note in the updated materials, many departments can handle investigations confidentially, but the Ethics Point hotline is one of the few that allows people to reach out anonymously. Another key thing to follow is reporter engagement and follow-up. We definitely want to keep up this same level or increase the follow-up level of our reporters checking in rather than just making a single statement or single report to investigate and sort of leaving it at that. And I think we should closely scrutinize to make sure that the numbers continue to reflect that we have an engaged audience. And if that number starts to drop, to take action appropriately. For that does sum up our kind of overview of the Ethics Point hotline. And we definitely look forward to providing an additional update next year or earlier as needed. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I've got one quick question. You referenced as part of the presentation, folks, utilizing this system potentially for other things besides the three main components of fraud, abuse of resources, those types of things. So is that something we encourage? Is that something that we just accept, or because as I look at this and the value of the system, I mean, some of the stuff we heard earlier during the public comment, you would think at some point, if it rose to this level, it would come through a system like this. I mean, you can anonymously present it, and it's something that clearly we work on, we take it seriously. So I'm just wondering if there's any opportunity to expand kind of this system to encourage broader use.
Thank you. And that is definitely something to keep an eye out for as this hotline continues to mature. I think other public agencies in the area have had a hotline for many more years than we have, including the State Department, I think, having their hotline since the late 70s. So we're still kind of getting to know the identity of the hotline as TriMet, and so we don't want to squelch or prevent any sort of report coming in, and definitely seek out to find that proper department or agency that could address the concerns that come in. And I also recognize that NAVEX, the group that hosts our hotline, hosts other hotlines as well that cover a variety of topics. Mm-hmm. And the portal and software that we have is robust in order to track a variety of issues and keep up with it. So I think we do have tools available if the Ethics Point hotline grows in a direction that is above and beyond simply the Secretary of State's recommendation. Mm-hmm. But I think also that's kind of a discussion for the Accountability Committee to say, well, given this information, what sort of mission and values can we determine for both the ethics hotline or possibly other initiatives about accountability?
Excellent, thank you.
I also just wanted to point out that there are, for various reports, there's already established channels. So for security-related issues, they already go get reported to security. Personnel issues go to human resources. Complaints with, for example, go to customer service. And should the employee not feel comfortable reporting it to the the channel that we already have established, then the hotline is available to them to be able to report anonymously.
I guess my quick addition to that is, so we don't necessarily encourage the point hotline for those HR or security or customer complaint issues, but it's available to. And so we want to make sure everybody knows it's available if they're much more comfortable with that anonymous reporting structure. And then it can still get back to the right channel for the investigation and resolution as needed.
Correct. Okay.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
I think my question was right along yours. I mean, to me, if somebody alleged they were being told to do something illegal, as an example, obviously they need to work through their chain of command, but ultimately if they don't feel comfortable or feel like, they're being shined on, this is a tool they can utilize. And it'll get to the right people, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, good. What else, Andy?
I'm good.
Well, you've been involved with it, so, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We'll look forward to the next report. So, does that conclude our briefing for
It does
today?
indeed. Thank you very much, board members.
All right, thank you. With that, I think we're done here, except for those who have to attend the finance committee meeting, right?
Did you say who would get to attend the finance committee?
They have the pleasure of.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah, I'd heard.